There were three things Riley Dawson learned in her first week working at Blackwood Industries. 1. The elevators never stopped on the 27th floor unless you had a clearance badge or a death wish. 2. Silence wasn't just common in the executive levels, it was required, as if words themselves had to justify their worth before being spoken. And 3. Victoria Blackwood did not smile. Not in meetings, not in hallways, not even in photographs. She was polished elegance wrapped in steel, her presence sharpened like a blade. When Riley first met her, she felt it in her bones, not fear, not awe. Something worse. Something entirely unreasonable. Fascination. She thought her interview had gone well, if surviving felt like success. Victoria had barely looked at her, only tapping her pen twice when Riley nervously rambled about her organizational skills. "I don't need someone organized, Miss Dawson," Victoria had said, finally lifting her eyes that were estranged, pale gray that seemed to see more than they should. "I need someone who understands silence." Riley had nodded even though she didn't understand what that meant. But somehow she got the job. Working as the executive assistant to Victoria Blackwood was a lesson in restraint. Victoria didn't raise her voice. She didn't rush. She didn't fumble, hesitate, or even blink at the wrong time. She walked through the office like someone who had already calculated every possible outcome and chosen the one that would cause the least chaos. She dressed like winter, charcoal, black, ivory, navy. No soft colors. No warmth. No softness at all, except for the moments when her gaze lingered too long near the windows, especially when the light outside turned silver at dusk. In those rare moments, Riley would catch something strange flicker across Victoria's expression, not emotion, but longing, as if something inside her was always shifting, always restraining itself. But Riley never stared long enough to be caught. Until she did. It happened on a Thursday night, 8 days into the job. Riley had worked late helping prepare documents for an upcoming merger, printing, binding, organizing the files by color-coded tabs. Victoria had already left, or so Riley thought. It wasn't until Riley got home and checked her bag that she realized her phone was missing. She had left it in Victoria's office. At nearly 11 at night. Riley wasn't sure which was more terrifying, entering that floor after hours, or the idea of Victoria finding her phone and reading her Spotify playlists named things like mildly anxious bread vibes. But after a 5-minute spiral of panic, Riley grabbed her keys and drove back to the building. The 27th floor felt different at night. The usual sterilized white lights were dimmed to a muted silver glow. The air felt colder, as if the temperature dropped the moment she stepped out of the elevator. No security guards. No staff. Just silence. And the faint hum of the climate systems. The executive hallway felt too long. Too quiet. Every step Riley took sounded louder than the last. She told herself to move quickly, not look around, not think. But then she saw it. Light. Soft, pale light bleeding through the glass walls of Victoria's corner office. She froze. She should have turned back. She should have left her phone, her job, her dignity, all of it. But something kept her rooted to the floor. Something she couldn't name. The door to Victoria's office was closed, but the blinds were halfway open. And through them, Riley saw movement. Not like someone pacing. Not like someone working. Something else. Something slow. And then she heard it. Not words. Not footsteps. A sound like bones shifting. The air inside the office trembled. Not visibly, but in the way the glass doors softly vibrated. Riley's pulse hammered. She took a step closer. Slow. Silent. Against better judgment. Through the glass, she saw Victoria, or something shaped like her, standing near the window, bathed in moonlight, wearing no shoes, hands pressed against the glass. Her posture was wrong, too tense, too arched, like she was holding herself back from something. Her reflection flickered in the window, not matching her movements. And then, her shoulders trembled. Her back arched unnaturally, not like pain, like transformation. Riley's breath stopped. Victoria's breathing changed. It was deeper now, like it belonged to something not entirely human. Her fingers curled against the glass, her nails, no, not nails, sharper. Her reflection rippled again, her eyes flashing not gray, but faint silver. The moonlight didn't just touch her, it reacted to her. And in that horrifying, beautiful, impossible moment, Victoria turned. Her eyes found Riley through the glass. Not surprised, not scared, just aware. As if she had known Riley would come. Riley couldn't move,
couldn't speak.
She could only feel two things, fear and fascination. Victoria, no longer entirely Victoria, stepped closer to the glass. Not threateningly, almost slowly. Controlled. As if keeping something inside from breaking free. Her eyes were silver now. Luminescent. Ancient. "Miss Dawson," she said softly, voice slightly altered. Not monstrous, but deeper, resonant, carrying something old. "You shouldn't be here." But she didn't sound angry. Didn't sound like she would erase her memory. Or fire her. Or destroy her. She sounded like she was afraid for her. Riley opened her mouth, but no sound came out. She was trembling, but not stepping back. Something in her refused to. Victoria blinked, and for a moment, her eyes softened. Human again. Not safe. Not predictable. But human. And that was worse. Because it meant she was both. And she felt everything. The silence between them now was different. It felt like the beginning of something dangerous. Something forbidden. Something alive. Victoria didn't break eye contact.
Didn't move to hide.
Didn't explain. She simply stood there, in moonlight and shadow, no longer entirely human. And yet, somehow more human than ever. Riley finally whispered, breathless, "What are you?" Victoria's answer was soft.
Terrifying.
Beautiful. Not someone you should stay with. But Riley didn't leave.
Not then.
Not ever. Riley didn't remember walking to the elevator. She didn't remember leaving the 27th floor, nor how her hands managed to press the right buttons, nor how she remembered to breathe. All she remembered was the look in Victoria's eyes. Not monstrous, not human, but something painfully in between. Something restrained. Something haunted. Something that, despite logic, despite reason, despite pure survival instinct, felt heartbreakingly familiar. She drove home with trembling hands, yet her mind was sharp, painfully awake, replaying the scene over and over. Not to understand it, but to feel it. The next morning, the office felt different, though nothing had actually changed. The hallways were still silent, the air still smelled faintly of polished wood and cold coffee, and the employees still whispered about Victoria Blackwood with a mix of reverence and fear. But Riley felt something new, awareness. The kind that changes everything even when nothing has changed. At 7:58 a.m., Victoria arrived. Sharp black suit.
Gloves.
Hair in that same smooth knot that looked sculpted rather than tied. Perfect, composed, untouchable. Human. Unreal. She walked past the reception area, and for just a millisecond, too brief to be caught unless someone was desperately looking, her gaze flickered toward Riley. Not a greeting. Not even acknowledgement. Just a flicker. The kind that said, "I know you were there. I know you know." Riley didn't say a word. Neither did Victoria. But silence, real silence, was never empty. At 8:03 a.m., her desk phone rang. No one called her on that line. Ever. "Miss Dawson," came Victoria's voice, calm, even, perfectly composed, but different somehow.
Crisper.
Controlled. "My office."
Now.
Riley's pulse jumped.
She stood.
Her legs moved, but she wasn't sure how. As she approached the glass doors, she expected to feel fear. But what she felt was something else entirely. Anticipation. Victoria's office looked exactly as it always did. Clean surfaces, dark wood, windows revealing a cold horizon of silver clouds and glass towers. But it felt different. There were no signs of last night. No moonlight. No trembling glass. No silver in her eyes. But something invisible hung in the air. Something unsayable. Victoria stood by the window, back turned, hands clasped behind her.
Close the door, she said.
Riley did.
Gently.
Quietly. Like it mattered. Victoria did not turn around. You saw something last night. Not a question. It was a statement. Riley's heart pounded, but her voice was steady. Yes. Silence.
Then a sigh. Soft.
Controlled. Exhausted. Victoria turned. Her expression was unreadable. Not angry. Not fearful. Not desperate. Just tired. Very, very tired. I should fire you, she said calmly. Riley nodded. Probably. Victoria studied her. I should make sure you never speak of this to anyone. Riley didn't look away. I won't. Victoria's eyes flickered, just slightly. Why? Riley swallowed. Because I don't think what I saw was meant to hurt me. Something flickered in Victoria's eyes. Not relief, not trust, but something like confusion. A carefully built wall crackled, just slightly. You always watch too closely, Victoria said. You see things no one else sees. It did not sound like a compliment. Most people choose comfort over truth. You did not. Riley hesitated. Does that make me a problem? Victoria's gaze didn't waver. It makes you dangerous. Riley felt her throat tighten, not from fear, but from something sharper. To you. Her voice was barely a whisper. Victoria stepped closer. Not enough to touch, but enough so that Riley could feel the aura she carried. Not warmth. Not cold. Something older. Heavier. To the truth, Victoria said. And the truth has claws. A chill raced up Riley's spine, but she did not back away. She had seen fear before. This wasn't fear. This was fate, wrapped in warning. Are you going to ask me what I am? Victoria asked suddenly. Riley didn't flinch. No, Victoria studied her face. Why not? Riley exhaled. Because I don't think you are just one thing. Something changed in Victoria's posture. Almost like she had been holding her breath without realizing it. You think I am a person, she said quietly. Not a creature. Riley's voice softened. I think you are a person with a creature inside. Silence.
Full. Heavy. Alive.
Victoria did something she had never done before. She sat down. Not elegantly. Not perfectly. But slowly. Like someone who had been running from something for so long that she had forgotten how to sit still. Riley stayed standing. Not because she wanted to, but because she didn't know how to move. Sit, Victoria said. But this time, it sounded less like a command, and more like an offering. Riley sat. And suddenly, nothing felt like an office anymore. It felt like a confession waiting to happen. There are things in this world that don't belong in light, Victoria said softly. Things that are better kept in shadows. Things that change. Things like you. Riley asked. Victoria looked at her. Slowly. Painfully. Things I was born to become. Whether I wanted to or not. Riley felt something heavy at that. Not fear. Not shock. Something almost like sadness. Does it hurt? She asked. Victoria blinked, surprised. But she nodded. Riley didn't ask what hurt. Not her bones. Not her body. She meant her loneliness. And Victoria knew that. I didn't want someone to see, Victoria said softly. Not like that. Riley nodded. Sometimes what we try hardest to hide is what someone most needs to see. Victoria looked at her. Not with anger. Not with caution. But with something far more dangerous. Curiosity. She leaned back slightly. You are not afraid of me. I am, Riley admitted. Victoria tilted her head. Then why are you still here? Riley swallowed. Because I also think you're afraid of yourself. Victoria froze. Not visibly, but in her eyes, something cracked open. Love what you've seen so far and want to help me keep creating these awesome stories on this channel? Then subscribe and hit the bell. Your subscription supports the channel and makes sure you get more exciting stories. For a moment, the air felt alive. Not threatening, not cold, just real, human, ancient. Victoria stood. Quietly. You will not speak of this, she said, voice steady but softer than before. You will continue your work. You will not ask questions. Riley nodded. I won't ask. But if you ever need someone not to run away, she did not finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Victoria looked at her, long carefully, as if memorizing her, as if deciding something. Then, only then, she said something new. Something that was not instruction, not warning, not command. You saw me, she said softly, and you stayed. And then, quietly, she dismissed Riley. But it wasn't rejection. It was self-protection. It was retreat. It was restraint. It was fear. Not of Riley, of feeling, because feelings could not be controlled. And Victoria Blackwood controlled everything, except perhaps this. And outside, beyond the glass walls, the moon waited. Riley learned something in the days that followed that silent confession. Not everything changes when a secret is revealed. Some things remain exactly the same, almost painfully so. Victoria Blackwood still walked through the halls like she existed in a different frequency than everyone else, still signed papers and led meetings and navigated high-stakes negotiations with surgical precision, and still did not smile, not even when she succeeded. Yet for Riley, everything was different, because now she watched, not with curiosity, not with fear, but with understanding. And Victoria noticed. She noticed when Riley started remembering how she took her coffee, not because she asked, but because Riley quietly observed that she only drank it when it was exactly 6 minutes old, not fresh, not cold, not sweetened. She noticed that Riley always paused before knocking, not because she was afraid, but because she listened, always listening. She noticed that Riley did not stare, not at her hands, not at her eyes, not at anything unusual, but noticed everything. And that was worse. On the third day after the incident, Victoria called her into the office without speaking a word. She simply waited as Riley walked in and stood across from her desk. There was no new secret to reveal. No transformation. No moonlight. Just silence. But it felt different. You're not asking, Victoria finally said, not looking up from her papers. About what you saw. You told me not to, Riley replied gently. Victoria's eyes lifted. Slowly. Most people do not listen when curiosity wins. Riley hesitated, then said quietly, I don't want to treat you like a mystery to solve. Victoria stilled. Truly stilled. Not like someone pausing, but like someone freezing, as if she were not accustomed to that kind of explanation. Then how do you treat me? She asked. Riley's heart beat louder than her voice. Like a person. Victoria didn't reply. Didn't look away. She simply watched. Carefully. As if analyzing a threat. Or an opportunity. Or something far more dangerous. Eventually she spoke. Most people believe the extraordinary reveals who we truly are, she said softly, almost thoughtfully. But I believe it is the ordinary. The moments without moonlight. Riley didn't know if she was allowed to answer that. So she didn't. She stayed. And she watched something flicker across Victoria's expression. Something she had never seen before. Not control. Not restraint. Not emptiness. Something warm and quietly devastating. Softness. But just for a moment. Then it was gone. The next week felt oddly calm. No lunar cycles. No trembling air. No shadows moving against windows. Instead, there were small things. Precise things. Human things. Riley noticed that Victoria never sat with her back to a window. She noticed that she always stood when she was thinking, pacing slowly, never in straight lines, always in slow arcs, like something inside her refused corners. She noticed that Victoria never wore open shoes, even at private events. She noticed that the moon made her quiet. Days before transformation, she did not become wild, or strange, or dangerous. Instead, she became distant, as if preparing, as if protecting, not others, herself. One evening, far after working hours, Riley was organizing documents in the executive lounge when Victoria walked in, not expecting anyone to be there. She paused, something unreadable flickering across her face. Riley lowered her gaze. I didn't mean to stay late, she said quietly. I'll be done soon. Victoria didn't walk away. She didn't tell her to leave. Instead, she crossed the room, silently, and stood beside her. Riley could feel the air shift. Not frightening. Not supernatural. Just real. Human. Victoria lifted one of the files, glanced at it, then at Riley. Her voice was softer than usual. "You organize things differently," she said. Riley blinked. "Is that a problem?" Victoria studied the papers. "No," a pause. "It makes more sense." Riley felt something warm in her chest. Not victory. Not relief. Something else, something like being seen. Victoria didn't leave. Instead, she sat, a rare occurrence outside of formal meetings.
She didn't speak.
She didn't look at Riley. But she didn't leave. And that mattered. That night, Victoria allowed silence to exist without command or control. For the first time, Riley understood what Victoria meant when she said she needed someone who understood silence. It wasn't about obedience. It was about presence. Victoria left without a word. But as she reached the door, she paused. Didn't turn around.
Didn't speak loudly.
She simply said, "Thank you." And then she was gone. Victoria's thank you lived in Riley's thoughts for days. It wasn't gratitude. It wasn't politeness. It was something else, some fragile, wordless acknowledgement that Riley had not demanded answers, and that mattered. That week, something unexpected happened. Victoria invited Riley to a meeting that wasn't a meeting. "I need you in the atrium," she said, without explanation. When Riley arrived, she found Victoria not in icy business form, but standing near a quiet corner of the indoor garden, surrounded by soft light, glass walls, and silence. Nothing was said for 5 whole minutes. Then Victoria spoke. "There are 2 kinds of looking," she said quietly. "Seeing, and waiting to see more." Riley didn't reply. But Victoria looked at her, softly this time. "You wait," she said. "That is dangerous." "To you?" Riley asked. Victoria shook her head. "To me, wanting you to keep waiting." Those words hovered between them, unspoken but alive. Victoria didn't let them stay long. She turned away, recovering her armor, placing her emotional walls back exactly where they belonged. But something had already shifted. The walls knew they had been seen, not broken.
Seen.
And that, perhaps, was worse. From that day on, Victoria didn't avoid Riley. She didn't test her. She didn't push her away. Instead, she let her stay. She let her be near. Not close, not yet, but near. Near was enough to be noticed. Near was enough to matter. Some nights, Riley would catch Victoria standing by the windows again, not during transformation, but simply watching the sky. Never reaching. Always observing. Always longing. And for the first time, Riley wasn't afraid. She simply stood beside her. Not touching. Not speaking. Just standing beneath the same moonlight. And Victoria didn't move away. She didn't excuse herself. She didn't build more distance. Instead, she said something new. Something terrifying. Something fragile. "Some nights," Victoria whispered, barely audible, "I wish I could be just one person." Riley didn't ask what she meant.
She didn't need to.
She already knew. She simply whispered back, "Maybe you already are." Victoria didn't answer. But her breathing changed.
Softer.
Real. Human. The moonlight did not touch her like it did before. That night, she did not feel like something extraordinary. She felt almost painfully human. That was far more dangerous. Riley was beginning to understand that when Victoria Blackwood wanted something, she never asked directly. She suggested, implied, placed things in carefully calculated proximity, and waited for someone to notice. It was not manipulation. It was protection. And when she wanted Riley to understand something, she never used words. That was how their first unspoken invitation happened. It was a Tuesday, nearly a week after the quiet conversation beneath the moonlit windows. The office had emptied hours earlier, yet Victoria was still there, perched by her corner window, reviewing projected reports with that eerie kind of stillness that made her seem carved from marble rather than living flesh. Riley was packing her things, prepared to leave, when the phone on her desk buzzed quietly. One message. Unusual. Victoria didn't text. She issued verbal directives or curt emails. But this was different. It was only 5 words. Do not leave just yet. Do not leave. Not come to my office. Not I need you to stay. Just don't leave. Riley stared at the screen, heart unreasonably loud. It was not a command. It felt like a request. She sat. She waited. Time moved strangely in the silence of the empty executive floor. Then, at precisely 7:47 p.m., her phone buzzed again. 3 words this time. Come to 27 Atrium. The atrium was not a formal part of her job. No meetings were held there. It was just an internal indoor terrace. High ceilings, glass walls, indoor trees that looked too lush and too alive to belong inside a building built from cold architecture and spreadsheets. When Riley reached it, Victoria was already there, standing near the far glass wall, hands clasped behind her back, looking at something beyond the city's skyline. She looked different. Not in clothing, not in posture, but in something subtler. She did not turn when Riley approached. But Riley sensed she had been waiting. Not for assistance. Not for information. For her. Miss Dawson, Victoria said quietly, voice lower than usual. Do you know why this floor exists? Riley glanced around. The atrium was serene in a way the rest of the building wasn't. Softer lighting. No harsh edges. No reflective surfaces. To impress people? Riley guessed softly. Victoria almost smiled. Almost.
No.
This part of the building has no security cameras. No recording systems. No mirrored glass. No reflective surfaces. Riley frowned. Why? Victoria's voice dropped, barely audible. So that what lives in shadow may remain in shadow. Riley froze. They both knew she was not speaking metaphorically. Victoria didn't explain further, and Riley didn't ask. They simply stood there, side by side, without facing each other, staring at the night. The moon was not full, not bright, not intense, just a pale sliver. Still, Victoria watched it like it was something that might change everything. Some nights, Victoria said quietly, I want to stand somewhere where nothing observes me. She paused. Except someone who chooses to. It sounded dangerously close to honesty. Riley swallowed softly. Why me? Victoria didn't look at her. Because you do not look like you want to own what you see. You just let it exist. They stood in silence. Not awkward. Not tense. Just deeply aware. Not touching. Not speaking. Just sharing space. It was startling how intimate that felt. Victoria was usually so composed, so perfectly controlled, her presence slicing through a room like cold structure. But here, she was softer. Not safe. But not armored. Riley noticed small things. The way Victoria's fingers subtly curled when she looked at the moon. The way her breathing changed. Not deeper, not faster, just more aware.
Alive.
When does it happen? Riley asked suddenly, not directly asking what she transformed into. Just when. Victoria didn't reply for a long time. Then she answered a question Riley had not asked. The moon does not create what I am, she said softly. But it reveals it. Riley didn't pretend to understand. She didn't move.
Didn't speak.
Just listened. Victoria turned her head then, just slightly, and a small silver thread of moonlight caught in her eyes. Barely visible, but there. Human. And something more. You're not afraid, Victoria said, voice unreadably soft. Riley hesitated. I think I am, she whispered. But the fear isn't of you. Victoria paused.
Slowly.
Then what is it? Riley's answer was barely breath. The way I feel when I look at you. That moment didn't break anything. It didn't shatter walls. It didn't lead to a kiss. It just changed the air. Victoria looked at her. Not with curiosity. Not with caution. But with recognition. Not of affection. Not yet. But of possibility. Genuine possibility. Victoria stepped closer. Not close enough to touch. Not close enough for heat. But close enough that Riley could feel the shape of her presence. And for someone who lived entirely in control, That was monumental. There are rules for people like me, Victoria said. Riley nodded, not fully understanding, but listening. We do not form attachments. We do not start commitments. We do not create longing. And we do not allow others to see what they should never wish to belong to. Riley held her gaze. You think affection is dangerous. Victoria said nothing, but her silence was an answer. You think feeling something makes you more dangerous, Riley whispered. Victoria inhaled, not sharply, not dramatically, but deeply, as if that one breath had taken years to allow. I think, Victoria said softly, carefully, painfully, that wanting someone makes you capable of hurting them. And I do not want to hurt you. Riley didn't step back, didn't step forward. She simply said, very gently, then don't. It wasn't simplistic. It wasn't naive.
It was raw.
And real. For a long moment, Victoria said nothing. She didn't move, didn't break. But in her silence, something shifted in her gaze. Her restraint didn't weaken. It adjusted. She stepped back, not out of fear, but out of caution. But before doing so, her hand moved, not reaching, not touching, but hovering. Hovering near Riley's hand. Not contact, not closeness, just nearness. Near enough to feel the heat. Near enough to mean everything. It stayed there just for a second. Then it was gone. Victoria didn't say goodbye. She simply asked, softer than ever, will you be here tomorrow? And Riley, without hesitation, without doubt, answered, yes. Victoria nodded once.
Slowly.
Like a promise she had never made aloud. And then she left.
Not coldly.
Not distantly. But quietly. Leaving behind not silence, something new. Waiting. And in the absence where she stood, Riley didn't feel fear. Riley didn't feel confusion. Riley felt one thing, and one thing only. Beginning. There was a certain irony to working beside Victoria Blackwood. The more she allowed you to be near, the less you understood how you had ever believed she was distant. She was not cold. She was careful. And that carefulness wrapped around her like armor, not to keep others out, but to keep something dangerous in, something ancient, instinctive, and deeply, heartbreakingly human. Riley noticed that Victoria had started letting her exist in her space without purpose. She still assigned tasks, still gave instructions, still demanded precision. But occasionally, without explanation, she would just pause and allow Riley to remain in the room even after business was concluded. Sometimes she would sit near the window, working through files in silence, while Riley sat across from her, typing, filing, organizing, existing. Sometimes she would stand in the atrium just to look at the sky, not watching for danger, not tracking the moon, just looking, breathing. Those were the moments Riley learned not to speak, not because she was afraid, but because silence had become something sacred. Sometimes being permitted to stay was more intimate than any conversation. And slowly, almost invisibly, the shape of their interactions changed. Victoria stopped calling her Miss Dawson. It wasn't sudden. It wasn't even conscious. It happened the morning Riley handed her a schedule and Victoria, without thinking, said, "Thank you, Riley." That moment was small, easily missed, perhaps forgettable, but not to Riley. Because for the next several seconds, Victoria seemed to realize what she had said, and whether or not she regretted it was not clear. But she did not correct herself. She did not apologize. She just let it stay. Riley said nothing, but something between them shifted. That same day, during a meeting with 3 senior directors, one of them made a comment about Riley, harmless, seemingly friendly, but slightly patronizing, dismissive in that subtle executive way that treats assistants as decoration. Victoria didn't react immediately. She let the man speak. Let him continue. Let him smile. Then, without raising her voice, she said, "You will not use that tone with my assistant." My assistant. The words were professional. And yet, something inside Riley tightened in a way that felt dangerously personal. Later, when they were alone, Victoria said nothing about it. Not an apology. Not an explanation. She just resumed work like normal. But when Riley placed a fresh cup of tea on her desk, Victoria looked at it a moment longer than usual. Not with gratitude. With awareness. As if some part of her was learning, slowly, painfully, that connection did not always equal danger. That evening, Victoria did something unfamiliar. She asked for Riley's opinion. Not on a document. Not on a schedule. On a moment. They were in the atrium again. At nearly 9 in the evening. Victoria had been silent for 10 minutes, watching the sky. No moon. No silver. Just dark. Human dark. "When you look at me," she said without turning, "what do you think you see?" Riley didn't answer right away, because she understood that the wrong answer could close every door that had slowly been opening. So she answered carefully.
Gently.
"I see someone who believes she has to be quiet to be safe. Someone who carries more strength than most, yet seems to think that strength cannot be shared. Someone who is afraid of being seen wanting something." A long silence. Longer than before. Riley did not look away. Victoria did not move. Then, without turning, she said, "Not someone who is dangerous?" Riley shook her head softly. "Dangerous and careful are not the same thing." Victoria's hands curled behind her back, very slightly, an unconscious fake. "And what if," she said slowly, "I stop being careful?" The question was not a threat.
It was a test.
Riley's voice was very soft when she answered. "Then I hope you know that I wouldn't run." That moment did not lead to a touch. It did not lead to a confession. But it shifted something fundamental. Because Victoria turned, not fully, not openly, but enough to look directly at Riley. Not with distance. Not with control. But with something warmer.
Sharper.
More vulnerable. Not quite longing. But something terrifyingly close. For the first time, she said Riley's name like it belonged to her. "Riley," she said quietly, "I do not know how to show you that I am trying." That was when Riley felt it, not pity, not discomfort, not fear. But something deep, fragile, tangible. Emotion. Real emotion. And perhaps even the earliest shape of tenderness. "You don't have to know how," Riley whispered, stepping just a little closer. "You just have to keep letting me see it." Victoria inhaled slowly.
Completely.
And for someone used to control, her next words were monumental. "Would you stay a little longer?" Not an order. Not a command. A request. Riley stayed. They didn't talk. They didn't touch. They just sat, Victoria in her usual chair, Riley across from her, and existed. Not in silence. In presence. Sometimes, presence was louder than words. Over the next week, something new began. Very small, but very real. When they passed in hallways, Riley no longer kept her eyes down. Victoria did not avoid looking back. Sometimes, just sometimes, Victoria lingered.
Not to speak.
Not to command. Just to be noticed. And sometimes, just sometimes, she seemed relieved to be seen. The small things became anchor points. The way Victoria paused before entering her office, always glancing at the sky first. The way she opened her window, not wide, not often, but just enough to feel something she could not name. The way she listened when Riley spoke, not just hearing words, but storing them. And one afternoon, when a storm swept through the city, lightning threatening the glass walls and wind rattling through the atrium's tall trees, something unusual happened. They were walking through the hallway. A large window rattled violently from the sudden rush of thunder. Riley flinched slightly, just startled, not afraid. But Victoria's response was instant and completely unguarded. Her hand reached out, quick, instinctive, protective, not touching, but coming dangerously close to Riley's forearm, as if to shield, to anchor, to hold. She didn't touch, but it was the closest they had ever been. When the thunder passed, Victoria withdrew.
Slowly. Carefully.
But not coldly. Almost reluctantly. Riley didn't say anything. She just looked at Victoria. And this time, Victoria didn't look away. She only said, barely audible, almost accidental, "Someday, I won't stop myself." And for the first time, it didn't sound like a warning. It sounded like a promise. And yet, she didn't touch her. And yet, she wasn't ready. And yet, Riley was willing to wait. Because waiting was slowly becoming a form of affection. Because waiting was slowly beginning to feel like choosing. There are certain moments in life that do not announce themselves as significant until much later, moments that slip quietly into memory, yet somehow reshape everything, not with declarations or confessions, but with the simple, undeniable truth of presence. For Riley, that moment came late on a Friday evening, long after most of the building had gone dark, when she found Victoria Blackwood sitting alone in the atrium, not working, not reading, not even watching the sky, but simply sitting, her posture too still, too controlled to be peaceful. It was not like her. Victoria did not linger unnecessarily. She did not sit in open spaces without purpose. And yet, she was there, in a soft gray sweater instead of a suit jacket, hair loosened slightly at the edges, hands still, eyes unreadable. There was no moonlight that night. No silver glow. No transformation. Only humanity, exposed and unguarded. Riley approached slowly, aware that her presence was both permitted and somehow requested. Victoria did not look at her, yet her voice, when it came, was soft enough to make Riley stop walking. "Do you ever feel," Victoria said quietly, "that your body remembers something your mind does not authorize?" Riley hesitated, then sat beside her. Not close, not touching, but beside her, near enough to matter. "What do you mean?" she asked. Victoria exhaled slowly, a sound that felt like something trying to escape. "My mind tells me silence is safe. Distance is safe. Control is necessary." A pause. Not a dramatic pause, but something deeper. "And yet, sometimes my hands move without permission." Riley turned, looking at her. "Like when the thunder startled me." Victoria didn't look at her, but she nodded, almost imperceptibly. That was not calculated. That was instinct. Riley didn't smile, didn't push, just listened. Victoria's voice was steady, but soft. "I do not trust my instincts. Instincts are unpredictable. Instincts are dangerous." Riley lowered her gaze, voice gentle. "Instincts are honest." Victoria's breath caught. Not dramatically, but enough. "Honesty can be dangerous," she said. Riley nodded. "Maybe."
But so can pretending.
Victoria did not speak for a long time. The atrium was quiet, the wind outside pushing softly against the glass walls, making the trees rustle in a way that felt almost like whispering. Slowly, very slowly, Victoria shifted, not away, not forward, but towards stillness. A different kind of stillness. One that was not made of restraint, but of surrender. "Sometimes," she said quietly, "the most dangerous thing in the world is wanting to be seen." Riley felt her heartbeat echo in her fingertips. "And sometimes," she whispered, "being seen is what keeps us alive." Victoria turned her head then, fully, completely, for the first time since Riley had sat down. Her eyes, usually pale gray, looked darker tonight, not empty, not cold, but heavy with something unnamed. Not longing, not quite, but it's beginning. "When you look at me," Victoria said softly, I do not feel safe." Riley swallowed. "I know." Victoria did not move away. "And yet," she whispered, "I do not wish to leave." That admission hung in the air like something sacred. And then it happened. No moonlight. No transformation. No dramatic revelation. No supernatural trigger.
Just a moment.
Victoria looked down. At her own hands. At the faint tension in her fingers. And then slowly, deliberately, she let them unclench. Riley did not move. She just watched as Victoria's right hand shifted, barely a motion, barely a choice, but moved toward her. Not reaching, not grabbing, just drifting. As if some quiet instinct had taken control. As if that instinct had stopped fighting. Riley didn't move toward it. She didn't dare. She waited. And there, between hesitation and bravery, Victoria's fingers touched hers. Barely.
Softly.
Skin to skin. Not a handhold. Not a gesture. Just touch.
Warm.
Real. Trembling. Victoria did not pull away. For a moment, Neither breathed. Then, so softly Riley almost didn't hear it, Victoria whispered, "This is dangerous." Riley nodded, voice barely breath. "I know." Victoria exhaled. "I do not want to stop." There was no rush, no escalation, no passion, just stillness shared. Their fingers brushed again, slower this time, tentative, unsure, unwilling to turn away. And finally, Victoria allowed her hand, not forced, not controlled, to rest fully against Riley's. Not gripping, not holding, just resting, choosing. They stayed like that. Minutes passed. The building settled into night. The wind quieted. The world outside their glass-walled sanctuary faded into silence. And still they stayed. No kiss. No confession. No promises. Just contact. And it felt like more than any confession could have been. When Victoria finally withdrew, she did not retreat like before. She did not hide her hand, did not apologize, did not build new distance. She just let her hand fall gently to her lap, eyes still on Riley. "You stayed," she whispered. Riley's voice was soft.
Steady.
"So did you." It was not a romantic moment. It was not passion. It was something far more dangerous. It was trust, raw, fragile, intentional trust. Victoria stood, eventually, but she did not dismiss Riley. Instead, she said, "Would you walk with me tomorrow?" Not to a meeting, not to a briefing, just walk. Riley nodded. Yes. Victoria blinked.
Once.
Slowly. And then she left. But this time, the air did not feel empty when she was gone. It felt held. And in that silence, Riley understood something. Victoria had not simply allowed herself to feel. She had allowed herself to be seen feeling. And for someone like her, that was monumental. That was dangerous. That was beginning. There are many ways a person can run without ever moving from where they stand. In the days that followed that quiet and unspoken moment of contact, when Victoria allowed her hand to rest against Riley's for the first time, something in her began to fracture, not painfully, not violently, but like ice slowly learning how to thaw, breaking not from force, but from warmth. And warmth, for someone like her, was far more terrifying than cold. Because cold was predictable. Cold was armor.
Cold meant safety.
But warmth meant change. And change meant danger she could not control. For a few days, Victoria did not pull away. She did not retreat to sharp boardroom silence. She did not rebuild her emotional defenses as quickly as before. Instead, she allowed something new to exist. Not affection yet, not romance, but presence. Riley noticed that Victoria no longer left rooms when she entered, and she no longer dismissed her from meetings when discussions ended. Sometimes, Victoria simply let her stay. Not because she needed her, but because she wanted her near. Wanting, however, was dangerous. Especially because the moon was beginning to grow full again. There were signs, small and subtle, but unmistakable if someone had been watching long enough, and Riley had. Victoria's movement shifted, graceful as always, but tighter at the edges, as though something under her skin kept pulling toward tension. Her breathing changed, not heavier, not labored, but deeper, as if every breath carried something she could not quite restrain. The air around her felt charged, not supernatural exactly, but as if something inside her was listening for something only it could hear. She touched her office window more often, fingers resting against the glass like someone trying to measure the distance between herself and the sky. Always the sky. Always the moon. And her eyes were changing too. Not glowing. Not silver. Just too still. Like someone watching herself from the inside, trying to hold something back. Riley didn't pretend not to see it. She didn't look away. And that was why Victoria finally said something. "There are certain times," she said quietly one evening as they crossed the executive hallway alone, "when I do not belong near other people." Riley didn't ask why. She already knew. But she did ask softly, "Does it hurt?" Victoria hesitated. That was answer enough. Then, after a long pause, she said, "Not the change. The restraint." Restraint. That was what Riley saw now, constantly. Not control. Not discipline. Restraint. Even in the smallest motions. The way Victoria held a pen as though it might snap in half if held too tight. The way she stopped herself from looking at the moon too long. The way she avoided mirrors. The way she flinched, almost imperceptibly, when someone brushed too close to her in hallways, withdrawing as if physical proximity had become too dangerous, too vivid. She did not seem violent. She did not seem unstable. She seemed aware, too aware, of how easily her control could slip, of how fragile humanity can feel when something larger, older, deeper, lives underneath it. Riley saw the fear, yes, but she saw something more.
Sorrow.
Not self-pity, not shame.
Sorrow.
Sorrow for all the ways she had learned to live away from touch. Sorrow for the loneliness that was never dramatic, never loud, but simply constant, like winter. As the full moon approached, that sorrow deepened, not into despair, but into distance. Victoria began avoiding common areas, not rudely, not coldly, but quietly. She still worked flawlessly, still performed every duty with precision, but she became less present. She did not linger after hours. She did not pause by the windows to watch the sky, not when Riley was there. She began to leave earlier, not because work had ended, but because something inside her had begun preparing. Preparing for moonlight, preparing for isolation, preparing for the wreckage of restraint. But one night, Riley did not let her leave alone. It was almost midnight. Everyone else was gone. Victoria stood in her office, staring at her reflection, but not into her own eyes, into the space where her eyes should be. Riley hesitated at the doorway, never entering without permission. But tonight she did. Quietly.
Carefully.
"You're leaving early," she said gently. Victoria did not look away from the window. "It is late." It wasn't an answer. Riley took a breath. "I can stay. Help finish what's left." Victoria shook her head, slowly, deliberately.
No.
"You cannot stay." Her voice was not firm, not cold. It was raw. Riley stepped closer. "You're afraid." Victoria finally turned to look at her, but it wasn't anger in her gaze. It was fear. Not fear of Riley. Fear for her. "I am losing control," Victoria said softly. Riley's heart thudded painfully, but her voice remained steady. "Are you afraid you'll hurt me?" Victoria didn't answer immediately. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she said, "I am afraid I won't be able to stop myself from wanting to be close." The words felt more dangerous than any threat. Riley stepped closer, not recklessly, not bravely, but intentionally. Victoria stepped back, not out of rejection, but out of desperation. "Please stop," she whispered. "You do not understand." Riley didn't stop, but her voice softened. "Then tell me." Victoria blinked, and something inside her shifted. She took a slow breath, deliberate, controlled. "I am not dangerous when I am wild." Her voice trembled on the last word. "I am dangerous when I am human." That sentence landed like a truth that had been waiting years to be spoken. Victoria wasn't afraid of becoming something else. She was afraid of what she might allow herself to feel as herself. Riley whispered, "You're not afraid of hurting me. You're afraid you might want not to." Victoria closed her eyes. And that was when Riley saw it. Not the monster, not the beast, not the curse, but the woman. And it broke her heart, not with pain, but with understanding. Victoria tried to compose herself, but her voice was shaking. "I cannot be what I wish I was." Riley shook her head gently.
No.
"You just cannot see that what you are might be enough." For a terrifying, beautiful moment, Victoria did not move, did not speak, did not resist. She simply existed, standing in the moonless half-light, caught between instinct and humanity, between fear and longing, between everything she had been told to suppress and everything she had begun to feel. "I have never," she whispered, "been allowed to believe that." Riley did something she had never done before. She reached out, not all the way, not fully, but enough to offer her hand, open, not grabbing, not pulling. offering. Then don't believe it alone. Victoria looked at her hand, not touching it. Her breathing slowed, even though the moon was coming. Not yet full, not yet bright, but close. I cannot let you stay near me when the moon is full, Victoria said carefully. I will not have control. I will not be safe. Riley nodded. I understand. Victoria looked at her. Long, soft, scared. But I do not want you to leave. Riley's answer was quiet.
Certain.
Then don't ask me to.
Victoria did not take her hand.
But she didn't step away either. Her voice, when it finally came, was softer than a whisper, but stronger than any wall. Someday, I might not want to stop myself from reaching back. Then I'll be here. Full moons do not announce themselves loudly. They do not arrive with thunder or howling wind or cinematic drama. They arrive quietly, like memory, like instinct, like something that's always been there waiting. The night of the full moon at Blackwood Industries felt ordinary to everyone except one woman. And one woman who chose to notice. The building was nearly empty. A few interns in lower floors, 2 night shift engineers, a security guard who rarely looked up from his crossword. Nothing unusual. Except Victoria Blackwood, whose every heartbeat felt like a pulse against something ancient, something awake, something she had chained all her life. And Riley, who could sense the shift in the air even before she saw her. It started early, before sunset. Victoria withdrew. Not disappeared, but withdrew. She stopped lingering in shared silence. She stopped holding Riley's gaze a second too long. She stopped allowing warmth. She wasn't cold. She wasn't dismissive. She was protecting something. Or someone. She left early that day, or at least pretended to. Meetings ended. Doors closed. Executives left. Silence grew. But Riley stayed. Because she felt something was different. Not dangerous. Not monstrous. Just fragile. She waited in the atrium, not out of recklessness, not out of curiosity. Out of instinct. And instinct, like truth, doesn't shout. It whispers. The sky outside the glass roof darkened. Clouds thinned. And the moon, almost unnaturally pale, rose higher. And that was when Riley heard it. Not a growl. Not a roar.
A breath.
A long, steady, trembling breath. Not from the beast. From the woman. Victoria stood near the far glass wall, facing the skyline, motionless except for her breathing. No suit. No heels. No armor. Only stillness, and a sweater too soft for her usual form. Her hands rested against the glass, not clenched, not clawed, but flat.
Steady.
As if she could anchor herself to the world by sheer force of will. She didn't turn when Riley approached. She didn't startle. She didn't pretend she wasn't expecting her. She only whispered, voice low, strained, beautifully human, "You shouldn't be here." Riley stepped closer. Not too close. Just near enough. "I know." Victoria didn't move. Didn't turn. But her eyes, reflected faintly in the glass, flicked to the moon. "I don't want you to see." Riley's voice was gentle. "We don't always get to choose what others see." That sentence landed like something painful and true. Victoria closed her eyes, and her breath stuttered. Not from pain, not from transformation, but from emotion. Real, raw emotion. "I am losing control," she said. "Not of the change. Of the feeling." Riley felt her heartbeat rise, not in fear, but in recognition. She took a slow breath. "Then don't try to control it tonight." Victoria finally turned, and the look in her eyes nearly broke Riley. They were not glowing silver, not wolf-like, not monstrous. They were unbearably human, and full of fear. Not fear of transformation. Fear of being seen during it. Fear of being seen wanting to be seen. Riley stepped closer. Victoria didn't back away. Her breathing grew shallow. The moonlight began to wash through the windows, pale, impossibly still. Something shifted in the air, not violently, not visibly, but undeniably. Victoria's hands curled slightly, not claws, not fur, not fangs, just curling, trembling hands. Riley spoke gently. Does it hurt? Victoria nodded. Not the shift, she breathed. The part when I try to stop being both things. Riley understood more than she ever had. Victoria did not hate what she became, nor did she enjoy it. What she hated, what hurt, was the inability to just be one thing. Always both. Always too much. Always impossible to fit in one skin. You're still yourself, Riley whispered. Even now. Victoria's breath shook. That's what terrifies me. The light grew brighter, not hospital bright, not magic bright, just moon bright. Silver, subtle, cold, honest. Victoria stepped back, not to leave, but to keep her distance. When it fully rises, she said softly, my body changes. My instincts sharpen. My restraint fades. I do not become something evil, but I do become something honest. Those last words struck something deep in Riley's chest. Honest. Then let me stay, Riley whispered. Let me see what honesty looks like. Victoria stared at her as though no one in her entire life had ever said something that frightening or something that kind. She took another unsteady breath. Then another. Then she nodded. Very slightly. Very slowly. The moon climbed.
Higher.
Unavoidable. And the air around Victoria began to change. But not in frightening ways. Not dramatic. Just real. Her breathing deepened. Her posture shifted. Not monstrous, not animalistic, just raw, unfiltered, unguarded. Her fingers curled, but they did not lengthen. Her eyes darkened, but did not glow. Her presence grew stronger. Her humanity grew sharper. She was not transforming into something else. She was becoming more intensely herself. More raw, more instinctive, more real. And that, paradoxically, made her look even more human. I do not want to hurt you, she whispered. Riley stepped closer. Then don't. Victoria's voice shook. I don't know how to want someone gently. Riley took one more step. Then let it be unguarded. Victoria looked at her long, intense, terrifyingly vulnerable. I am not safe. Riley shook her head.
No.
You are not controlled. That's different. Victoria's breath caught. Like impact. Like relief. Like grief. She didn't step forward. But she also didn't step back. And when Riley slowly, very slowly, lifted her hand and extended it, not touching, not demanding, just offering, Victoria did not resist. She didn't reach. But she didn't retreat. And then finally, her hand moved. Not like before, tentative, hesitant, trembling. This time, deliberate. Awake. Human. She reached. And their hands touched, not with romantic gentleness, not with electric tension, not with cinematic urgency. With honesty. Honest fear. Honest want. Honest presence.
Her pulse was rapid.
Her hand was warm. Too warm. But she didn't let go. Neither did Riley. The moon rose fully, spilling silver across the floor. And for the first time in her life, Victoria Blackwood allowed herself to feel both human and something more, without apology, without restraint, without shame. I have never transformed while being seen, she whispered, almost in disbelief. Because no one ever stayed. Riley's voice was softer than the moonlight touching her skin. I didn't stay to watch the change. Victoria looked at her, searching. Then why? Riley whispered, I stay to see who you are afterward. Victoria closed her eyes. And that, more than the moon, more than the shift, set something free inside her. They did not kiss. Their bodies did not move closer. But their hands remained joined. Not accidentally. Not hesitantly. Willingly. And for Victoria, that was the real transformation. Not fur. Not silver. Not fangs.
But trust.
And somewhere deep inside her, something ancient, something wild, exhaled. Not in surrender. In peace. And this time, she did not hide. And this time, Riley did not run. And for the first time, neither of them felt alone in the moonlight. The morning after the full moon always felt strange for Victoria Blackwood, but this time it felt entirely different, because for the first time in her life, she remembered everything. Not just fragments, not just instincts, not just the sharp clarity of heightened senses and animal awareness. No, this time she remembered every quiet second of it. She remembered Riley's steady voice, not filled with fear or excitement, but something worse, something better, something dangerously sincere. She remembered the way Riley never stepped back. She remembered the way Riley's hand remained open until she chose to take it, not like a frightened girl facing a creature, but like a person choosing another person, exactly as they were, human, monstrous, uncertain, painfully real. And worst of all, she remembered how her body didn't fight it. How everything inside her, every instinct, every warning, every frozen part of her, had not urged her to flee or threaten or protect. It had urged her to stay, to feel,
To trust. To want.
That was the most terrifying part. She didn't wake restless. She didn't wake feral. She didn't wake disoriented. She woke aware. And that was far more dangerous. For the first time in her life, Victoria did not fear losing control. She feared choosing not to. She spent the mornings shutting doors. Not physical doors, not offices, not conference rooms, emotional doors, the ones no one could see but everyone who mattered could feel. She arrived at work before sunrise, long before Riley, dressed sharply, precisely, with the look and armor of a woman who never deviated from who she was supposed to be. She looked untouchable, unshaken, but she had never been more breakable. When Riley arrived at her desk, she felt the difference before she saw it. Victoria's door was closed, not unusual, but colder than usual. Not cold like ice, cold like distance. The kind designed to protect something soft. Riley did not knock. Not yet. Not to demand attention. She waited, as she had learned to do. She understood the difference between being shut out and being given time. By noon, the office moved around them, unaware. Victoria led meetings with calm brilliance, the perfect image of control. No tremors. No warmth. No cracks. And yet, Riley noticed. She noticed how Victoria didn't meet her eyes. How she didn't linger at the window. How she didn't pause when their hands accidentally brushed while exchanging documents, but withdrew a fraction too quickly. Not from disgust, not from rejection, but from fear of wanting not to. Victoria was not ignoring Riley. She was protecting herself from her. It was not rejection. It was self-defense. That afternoon, Victoria dismissed the staff early. Firmly. She claimed she had calls to take, late-night international negotiations. It wasn't true. Riley knew it. The way she avoided her gaze was too careful, too precise. Riley waited until the entire floor was empty. And then she knocked. Not like before, not uncertain, not timid. Just one soft, deliberate knock on the door that was closed, but only physically. "Come in," Victoria's voice answered, perfectly calm.
Too calm.
Riley entered. Victoria stood by the window.
Of course she did.
It was where she always went when she was more human than she wanted to be. The moon was gone tonight. Just darkness. A different kind of truth. "You're shutting me out," Riley said quietly. Not a question. Victoria didn't turn. "I am protecting you." From what? Silence.
Deep. Thick. Real.
Then finally, from what I am when I stop holding back. Riley stepped closer. "You didn't lose control last night." Victoria closed her eyes as if that truth cost something to hear. "That's exactly why I am afraid." Riley's heart ached. Not with pity. With recognition. "Victoria, you didn't hurt me." Victoria exhaled sharply. Almost a laugh, but too bitter to be one. "You think that's what I'm afraid of?" Riley paused, studying her. "You're not afraid of hurting me. You're afraid of wanting me." Victoria turned then, not slowly, not dramatically, but like someone finally too tired of running. And the look in her eyes was so painfully human that Riley forgot to breathe. "Do you know what desire is like for people like me?" Victoria asked, voice quiet, dangerous. "It is not polite. It is not soft. It is not reasonable. It does not ask permission. It does not wait for safety." Riley didn't move back. Desire isn't supposed to be safe. Victoria's breathing changed. It should be when I am the one feeling it. Riley felt something inside her fracture, not break, not shatter, just open. You want to protect everyone from you, but no one has ever tried to protect you from yourself. Victoria looked at her then, with something that was not patience, not restraint, not control. Something that felt like grief. Grief for all the years she had spent trying to become less of herself just to be allowed to exist among others. "Do not make me wish," she whispered. "I don't know how to survive wishing." That line landed inside Riley like a truth she had always known but had never put into words. That was why Victoria didn't trust herself. Not because she couldn't control pain. Because she couldn't control hope. Hope was dangerous. Hope made her want. And want made her break rules. Ancient ones. Personal ones. The ones that kept her alone, but alive. Riley stepped forward. Not recklessly. Not fearlessly. Just honestly. "I'm not asking you to wish," she whispered. "I'm asking you to stay." Victoria stared at her, breathing deeply, almost painfully. "What if I don't want to stay away?" Riley didn't hesitate. "Then that's the first thing you should stop controlling." Those words did not break anything, but they unlocked something. Something Victoria had spent a lifetime locking away. She didn't move, but her expression shifted, like watching a frozen lake begin to thaw, not with heat, but with truth. "I do not know how," she whispered. And Riley, soft, steady, unafraid, replied, "You don't need to know. You just need to stop leaving when you most want to stay." Victoria closed her eyes, slowly, deliberately, not to escape, but to feel. And when she opened them again, she didn't move away. Physically, she did nothing. Emotionally, she let herself remain. That was her choice. Her first real choice. "Will you be here tomorrow?" she whispered. "Yes," Riley breathed. And this time, Victoria didn't nod out of habit or courtesy. She nodded with belief. She believed just a little. She believed that maybe wanting to stay did not equal danger. That maybe longing was not weakness. That maybe she could be both human and wolf, gentle and wild, controlled and feeling, and maybe someone could see all of it and not run. Not because they were brave, but because they cared. When Riley left, Victoria didn't watch her go. She listened, and for the first time, the sound of her footsteps leaving did not feel like safety. It felt like hope, which, for someone who had never allowed herself to wish, was the most terrifying and beautiful danger of all. Victoria had never been afraid of her strength, nor of the thing that awakened under Moonlight. She knew how to restrain it, how to bend it beneath control, how to live with something powerful and ancient raging inside her without letting it consume her. But she had never learned how to stop something quietly human from taking over, wanting someone. Not urgently, not recklessly, just wanting. Wanting to remain. Wanting not to hide. Wanting to be known. And worse, wanting to be known gently. That was far more dangerous than any full moon. The fear didn't come from violence. It came from softness. Which was why, when she asked Riley to have dinner with her, not professionally, not accidentally, not because they happened to be working late, but because she wanted to, her voice shook. She reserved a quiet restaurant tucked into a corner of the city that felt like it had been preserved from time and judgment, soft golden lights, thick wooden beams, and an antique piano in the corner that no one played. No business dinners were held there. No board members came to dine. It was too human, too intimate. Too still. Victoria arrived early. She wasn't used to waiting. She wasn't used to feeling her heartbeat. It was unsteady, too alive for someone who had spent a lifetime mastering stillness. When Riley walked in, something in the room shifted, not loudly, but irrevocably. She wasn't dressed extravagantly, just a dark coat, loose hair, something in her expression that was both nervous and steady, as if she knew something important was happening but didn't want to frighten it away. Victoria stood when she saw her. A gesture so small, yet so deeply significant that Riley felt it before she understood it. Dinner was calm, quiet, not cold, not distant. Victoria spoke, not about work, not about strategies, not about productivity, but about silence, about childhood, about being different even before she understood why. Not about the wolf, about loneliness. About watching others laugh without ever fully understanding how they felt safe doing it. Riley listened without pity. That mattered. Victoria noticed. She asked Riley things too, not just polite questions, not shallow curiosities, but careful, intentional things. What comforted her? What scared her? What made her choose to stay when she could have walked away so many times? Riley did not talk about bravery. She talked about recognition. "You make sense to me," she said quietly, and from the way Victoria's fingers stilled around her glass, Riley knew no one had ever said that to her before. They left the restaurant late. Neither wanted the night to end, but neither knew how to ask the other to keep it going. They walked. No destination. Just walking. The air was crisp, the city glowing softly around them. Victoria walked slower than usual, not with aimless wandering, but with something closer to peace. When they reached the building, Victoria did not go to the elevator. She turned instead to the atrium. Riley followed, not because she was told, because she belonged. Inside, there were no lights except the city glow through the glass. The moon was not full tonight, just a simple, soft crescent, gentle and harmless. Victoria stood near the center of the room and simply breathed. Not carefully, not silently, correctly, normally. She looked at Riley, not watching, not studying, not analyzing.
Seeing.
For a moment, there was no CEO, no curse, no restraint. Only a woman. And a choice. "I'm still afraid," Victoria whispered. Riley nodded. "I know." Victoria took a breath, and when she exhaled, her voice trembled. Not with panic, not with weakness, but with courage that had been too long unused. "But tonight, I do not want to leave." The words lingered in the air like something sacred. Riley stepped closer, not to console, not to rescue, but to meet her. "Then don't," she whispered. Victoria's eyes lowered. Not in shame. In surrender. "I don't know how to stay gently." Riley's heart felt painfully alive. "Then stay honestly." For a long moment neither moved. Everything that had been building between them, every glance, every moment of silent permission, every soft admission of fear, seemed to hum in the space between their bodies, like a promise waiting to be chosen. Victoria didn't reach for her suddenly. It wasn't urgent, desperate, or uncontrolled. It was slow, intentional, vulnerably human. She lifted her hand and touched Riley's face, not like someone claiming, not like someone testing, but like someone discovering something fragile and beautiful for the first time. Like reverence. Like trust. Riley didn't close her eyes. She wanted to see this moment. Victoria's fingers trembled against her cheek. Not cold.
Warm. Alive.
Unrestrained. "This feels more dangerous than the moon," she whispered. Riley's voice was barely audible. "Then it must be real." Victoria's breathing changed. Slow. Unsteady. Human. She didn't step back.
She didn't hide.
Her forehead lowered gently until it rested against Riley's, soft, hesitant, real. She exhaled like someone who had been holding their breath for years without ever realizing it. And then, without rush, without fear, without calculation, she kissed her. It was not perfect. It was not practiced. It was not controlled. It was trembling and careful and heartbreakingly vulnerable. It wasn't passion. It was permission. Permission to feel. Permission to want.
Permission to be.
Victoria didn't lead the kiss. She allowed it to happen, as if she had never been allowed to simply feel without controlling the outcome. Riley's hand found hers, not pulling, not taking, just finding. Their fingers intertwined. That was the real intimacy. That was the moment something changed. Not the kiss itself, but the fact that Victoria didn't pull away. She didn't apologize. She didn't leave. She stayed. When they parted, they didn't move far. They stayed close, foreheads still touching, breaths unsteady, hearts even more so. Victoria whispered, "I have never felt something I didn't have to fight." Riley brushed her hand gently against hers. "Then maybe this is the first thing that isn't meant to be fought." Victoria closed her eyes. And for once, she let herself believe that might be true. They didn't say goodnight. They didn't want the night to end. So they sat in the atrium, side by side, hands quietly intertwined, heads leaned gently together. Not claiming, not confessing, simply existing in the most intimate way possible, unafraid. For the first time in her life, Victoria Blackwood remained exactly where she wanted to be. Not because she was safe, but because she felt seen and didn't want to run from it. Victoria had prepared herself for many worst-case scenarios in her life, her mind conditioned to search for threats, for what could go wrong, for what might expose her, harm her, or break the carefully constructed boundaries she built to survive. But she had never, not once, prepared for what it would feel like when something went right, when nothing exploded, when nothing was ruined, when something quietly beautiful simply existed, and she was allowed to exist inside it. The morning after their first kiss did not come with panic. It did not come with regret or withdrawal or emotional barricades forced back into place. Victoria woke not with fear, but with awareness. And that was even more terrifying. She remembered the softness of Riley's skin beneath her fingertips, the way Riley didn't rush the kiss, the way she didn't ask for it, didn't demand it. She simply allowed it to happen. And Victoria, for the first time, had not controlled it. She had chosen it. And what was even more dangerous, she wanted to choose it again. She arrived at work 20 minutes later than usual, something that would normally irritate her, but today she barely noticed the time. Her assistant noticed her entrance, but what caught more attention was the lack of her usual coldness. It was almost imperceptible, but it was there. She walked slower. She looked present. Her office felt different when she entered it. Not because anything had changed externally, but because she had. She sat, hands folded calmly, not tightly, for the first time in years. She didn't look at her schedule right away. She allowed herself 1 minute. One silent minute to remember. When Riley arrived, it was deliberate, not early, not late, but exactly on time. Something about that felt meaningful. She knocked lightly, not because she had to, but because it felt respectful. Victoria looked up. Their eyes met. Nothing dramatic happened. No physical reaction, no trembling hands, no sudden move toward or away from each other. Something far more intimate happened. They both stayed. The moment felt fragile, like a porcelain secret that would break if handled carelessly, yet neither seemed ready to let go. "Good morning," Riley said softly, and it was strange how those 2 words felt like the beginning of something. "Good morning," Victoria replied, and it was stranger still how those 2 same words felt like acceptance. They were both careful that day, not distant, not stiff, just careful, as if protecting something new that might grow if they didn't scare it away. Their conversations were slightly different, lighter, more meaningful. Victoria didn't avoid eye contact. Riley didn't hesitate to speak when she had something to say. But they did not touch.
Not physically.
They were both too aware of how much the simplest touch could mean now. In the afternoon, a storm rolled over the city. Soft at first, then harder, with streaks of lightning that painted the windows in quick flashes. Usually, Victoria ignored weather. But today, she stood by the window, watching the rain, listening to it, feeling something strangely calm. Riley approached, not too close, not too far. Just near. Comfortable. "You always look like you're waiting for something," Riley whispered. Victoria did not turn. "Maybe I am." Riley hesitated, then asked, "Are you still afraid?" Victoria's jaw tightened, not in defensiveness, but self-awareness. "Yes," she said truthfully. "But not of you." Riley's voice was soft. "Then of what?" Victoria slowly turned to look at her, eyes softer than Riley had ever seen. "Of who I let myself be around you." Riley didn't smile. It wasn't a smile kind of moment. It was something deeper. "Maybe that's the real you." Victoria looked at her then, not sharply, not calculatingly, just looked. "You make me feel like I am allowed to be more than one thing." Lightning flashed against the window, and without thinking, Victoria reached, just slightly, and brushed her fingers against Riley's hand. It was hesitant, questioning, uncharacteristically gentle. Riley turned her hand, allowing their fingers to align, not tightly, not possessively, just aligned. It was not a romantic gesture. It was something quieter, something sacred, recognition. A knock on the door interrupted them, not violently, just reminding them that the rest of the world still existed. Victoria pulled her hand back, not in fear, but in acknowledgement. Riley did not look hurt. She understood. That night, Victoria did not return to an empty penthouse. Instead, she stood in the atrium once more, surrounded by glass and night, waiting. She didn't quite know what she was waiting for, but she stayed. When Riley entered the space, Victoria felt it before she heard it. The air shifted. Something familiar, now safe. Victoria didn't move. Riley approached slowly. No words, just presence. They sat. Not as CEO and employee. Not as predator and intruder. Just two people trying to understand what it meant to feel. And then, slowly, as if something invisible called them, they stood. Victoria's breathing was steady but deep. Riley's heartbeat was fast but sure. Victoria spoke softly. "Why aren't you afraid of me?" Riley paused, choosing her words. "Because I've seen you at your most dangerous. And it didn't scare me." Victoria swallowed. "And what if this," she gestured between them, "is even more dangerous?" Riley stepped closer, heart pounding in ways that felt like truth. "Then I don't want to run from it."
Calm. Honest.
Unafraid. That was the moment that changed something again. Not dramatically, but unmistakably. Victoria didn't lean in suddenly or kiss her impulsively. That would have been too easy. Instead, she did something far more intimate. She lowered her guard. She let her voice become small. "I don't know how to feel this," she whispered. Riley stepped even closer, their hands almost but not quite touching. "You don't have to know. You just have to feel." Victoria breathed slowly. And then, she allowed herself to rest her forehead against Riley's shoulder. Not in passion. In surrender. In trust. In something she had never let herself want. Comfort. Riley didn't move. Didn't hold her tightly. Didn't turn it into something more. She simply stayed. That was what made it intimate. That was what made it real. They stood like that for a long time, neither quite ready to move, neither needing to rush. It was not about the kiss anymore. They already had that. It was about everything that made the kiss possible. Choice.
Trust.
Willingness. Quietly, without rush, Riley eventually placed a hand over Victoria's, not guiding, not claiming, just holding.
Warm.
Gentle. Human. Victoria whispered, "I am starting to understand why you aren't afraid." Riley replied softly, "Because there is nothing monstrous about wanting to be loved." And Victoria, for the first time, believed it might be true. Victoria had always felt the moon before she saw it, the way some people sense storms rolling in before the clouds even began to gather, a silent pressure in her bones, a whisper inside her blood, something ancient stirring where she preferred it remain quiet. But lately, something felt different. It wasn't just the pull of the moon anymore. It was something else, something that felt like awareness. Not hers, but someone else's. As if something had noticed her, like she had finally made a noise after years of silence, and now something had turned to look. That realization appeared slowly, creeping in the edges of her thoughts like a warning that didn't come in words, but in instinct. But even then, even with that growing unease, Riley's presence became its own kind of gravity, quiet, grounding, real. The atrium became their space, not officially, not intentionally, but naturally, a place neither of them claimed but both returned to. Not for passion, not for secrecy, but for comfort. Victoria no longer sat on the far bench by the windows like she used to, always positioned to watch the moonrise alone. Now she sat on the third step of the polished stone staircase, in the soft pool of lamplight from the chandelier above, where shadows danced gently, far from threatening. Riley joined her, sitting exactly close enough that their shoulders almost touched. Not touching, just existing next to each other. It was the kind of closeness that didn't announce itself. It simply stayed. One evening, Victoria spoke, not about control, not about fear, not about what she was, but about silence. Sometimes, she said softly, I think I became quiet so I wouldn't have to hear how loud other people's fears were. Riley listened, her breathing soft and slow. And now? Victoria hesitated, then looked at her, really looked. Now, I hear something else. What? Riley asked softly. You don't fear me, Victoria whispered. Riley didn't smile. Her answer was too honest for smiles.
I don't, she said.
But I see that you do. That landed somewhere deep, somewhere Victoria rarely allowed herself to feel. I am not afraid of what I become, she said slowly. I am afraid of what it might cost. To who? Riley asked gently. Victoria took a long time to answer. Finally, softly, painfully, you. The silence between them didn't crack. It deepened. It felt less like fear and more like truth, terrifying, liberating truth. Riley didn't reach for her. She didn't rush to comfort, didn't offer hollow reassurance. She just stayed. And sometimes staying was more intimate than any touch. But the quiet began to change. One night, when Victoria entered the atrium, she did not pause at the window. She walked to the very center of the marble floor, the part most exposed to the moonlight through the glass ceiling. Riley felt the difference immediately. Victoria wasn't just silent tonight. She was unsettled, not frightened, on alert. Her shoulders a fraction too tense. Her breathing a fraction too controlled. Her eyes scanning, not visibly but internally. Something's not right, Victoria murmured. Not to Riley specifically, but because she needed to say it aloud to confirm it. Riley felt her pulse quicken, but she didn't step back. Is it you? Or something else? She whispered. That question surprised Victoria and somehow grounded her. Something else, she said slowly, but close. And then, very softly, like an admission, it is looking for me. Or, hunting you? Riley asked quietly. Victoria exhaled, not sharply, but like someone accepting what was true even if they wished it wasn't. Sometimes, there is no difference. They didn't talk about it more, not explicitly. Riley didn't demand answers, and Victoria didn't panic. But something shifted. Not between them, around them. Like the world had noticed the fact that Victoria wasn't entirely hiding anymore. And things that sensed weakness, or change, had begun to stir. The next day at the office, Victoria wasn't panicked. She was sharper. Not cold, precise. Watchful. People noticed, though they didn't understand. She was too composed for suspicion. But two department heads whispered that they had never seen her quite so alert, not even before major acquisitions. Riley watched carefully, not with fear, just awareness. That night, when Riley arrived at the atrium, Victoria was already there. She wasn't pacing. She didn't look restless. She sat perfectly still, too still, like stillness itself had become her shield again. Riley approached, slowly, deliberately, and sat beside her. Silence. Long real. You are quiet again, Riley whispered. Victoria didn't deny it. When the world starts looking, I get quieter, she said, voice low. It's how I disappear. But she didn't disappear tonight. She stayed. That mattered more than anything. Do we need to hide? Riley asked, calm, steady, not panicked. Victoria turned to her, and the smallest flicker of surprise crossed her face. Riley had said we.
Not you.
Not I.
We.
That word did something deeply dangerous to Victoria. It made her heart beat. She looked at Riley, really looked, and something soft, something unbearably human, flickered in her eyes. I don't want to hide, Victoria whispered. Riley didn't reach for her hand. She didn't move closer. But her voice softened. Then don't. Victoria paused, then, bravely, quietly. It isn't safety I'm afraid of losing. It's you. Riley breathed slowly, deeply. Then let me stay. Even if things get frightening. Victoria didn't answer right away. She didn't promise anything. But she did something far more intimate. She didn't retreat. She let her shoulders unclench, not visibly, not dramatically, but enough for Riley to notice. She let the silence soften. She let Riley be near her, without pretending it was safe, without pretending it was normal, without pretending it was anything less than terrifying and extraordinary. That was trust. Trust was never about security. It was about staying where you could get hurt, and letting someone be close anyway. That night, Victoria didn't speak of curses or bloodlines or what hunted her. Not yet. But before she left the atrium, she said something that felt like a beginning. "You may see more," she whispered, eyes on the moon. "More than you have already seen." Riley didn't flinch. "Then I'll look." And Victoria, for the first time, even as danger stirred somewhere unseen, did not feel alone. And that was the real beginning of the risk. Victoria did not sleep the night before, though not because of the moon this time. There was no silver glow forcing its way through her veins, no animal instinct pushing against the cages of her restraint, no transformation lurking beneath her calm. Instead, there was something much quieter, much more dangerous, thought. She had long believed that the only thing she needed to guard herself against was the wolf, but now she had learned the truth. What she truly feared was the version of herself that didn't want to hide anymore. The version that wanted to stay.
The version that wanted to speak.
The version that wanted to trust Riley with things she had never said to anyone, not because they were too monstrous, but because they were too human. She arrived at the atrium later than usual, which meant Riley was already there. Sitting in their place, not claimed, but naturally theirs, waiting. Not with impatience. With readiness. The kind of readiness that made Victoria realize how much she had changed. Riley's gaze did not ask for answers, it waited for them. Victoria approached, slower than usual, but not with hesitation. She sat beside Riley, closer than she needed to. Not touching, just nearer. She kept her eyes forward, on the glass ceiling above them, where faint strands of cloud drifted across the darkness, hiding and revealing pieces of moonlight like secrets that were not quite ready to be fully exposed. "I will tell you something tonight," Victoria began softly, "but I need you to understand something first." Riley looked at her, not urging, not pushing, just listening. Victoria's voice was calm, but it held a strange fragility, like something old and buried was being unearthed inside her. "This, whatever this is between us," she said, gesturing quietly between them, "it is not simple for me. Not because it is wrong. Not because I do not want it. But because it feels like the only thing I have ever wanted that isn't born out of necessity or fear." Riley didn't speak. She understood that silence was not emptiness, it was permission. Victoria drew in a measured breath. "The first transformation I remember was when I was 12. That alone told Riley everything she needed to know. Victoria had never spoken of this to anyone. "It was not the first time it happened," Victoria continued, "but it was the first time I remembered it afterward." She did not look at Riley. She wasn't ready for eye contact yet. The weight of memory was easier to carry when she looked at the sky. "My mother was already gone," Victoria said, not with bitterness, not even with grief, but with the dullness of a fact that had never fully healed. "No one told me why she left. But I think she was afraid." Silence. Not empty.
Soft. Deep.
"My father didn't speak of it," she continued quietly. "But he feared it. He feared me. Even when I wasn't changing, he watched me. Not like a daughter. Like a possibility." The chill of that word, possibility, shivered through Riley. Not a threat. Not a child. A possibility. Of what? Of danger? Of legacy? Of curse? Victoria exhaled slowly. "You asked me once if my curse was physical or emotional," she whispered. "The truth is, it was emotional long before it ever became physical." She turned then, looked directly at Riley. Eyes open, unprotected. "Because my curse is not becoming something uncontrollable under the moon," she said. "My curse is believing that the only part of me worth protecting the world from is the part that feels." That hit deeper than any dramatic confession could have. Riley felt that line settle into her chest like a quiet truth, not sharp like pain, but heavy like recognition. I have never trusted anyone with my truth, Victoria said. Not because I feared what it would do to them, but because I feared what it would do to me, what it would make me want. Riley's voice was soft when she finally spoke. And what is it that you want, Victoria? It was the boldest question Riley had ever asked, not because of the words, but because of the answer it demanded. Victoria looked at her, really looked, and something in her eyes was no longer guarded, no longer closed. Her voice, when it came, was quiet.
Raw.
Unscripted. I want to stop preparing for you to leave, she said. Riley felt her breath catch in her chest, not because she was surprised, but because she had been waiting for Victoria to say something real, for Victoria to choose something real, for so long, that hearing it felt almost unreal. And then, without thinking of consequences or danger, or curses, or promises that might break, Riley reached out.
Slowly.
So slowly that Victoria could have pulled away at any second. But she didn't. Their fingers touched, not possessively, not dramatically, just gently resting together. Victoria's shoulders softened, and the relief that crossed her face did not look like victory. It looked like surrender. A beautiful, necessary surrender. Riley's voice was steady. I'm not leaving. Victoria nodded once, small, almost imperceptible, but it meant something enormous. She believed her, not just because Riley said it, but because something inside her, something older than fear, finally allowed her to. They stayed like that for a long time, not speaking, not rushing, not defining. Just being. Eventually, Victoria spoke again. Something is looking for me, she said. Something old. Something that remembers my family. Something that helped make us what we are. Riley listened, not shocked, not afraid, just listening. Victoria continued. It is not coming for me because I transformed. It is coming because for the first time in my life, I did not hide. Silence.
Thick. Real.
But neither of them moved away from each other.
Fear did not drive them apart.
It drew them closer. If it comes, Victoria whispered, voice steady, I do not know what it will take, or what it will cost. Riley's response was immediate. So simple. So devastatingly honest. Then we will face it when it comes. Victoria looked at her like someone realizing she was not unfinished, just unchosen. Until now. You do not understand what that means, Victoria whispered.
Maybe not, Riley said.
But I understand this. You are not alone in it anymore. That was your choice. So let it be ours now. That was the moment. Not the kiss. Not the night of the transformation. Not even the confession. That was the moment something changed forever, because that was the moment Victoria allowed her curse to become something shared. Not by magic. Not by ritual.
By choice.
She did something then she had never done before. She didn't hide her trembling hand. She let Riley see it. And for the first time, she did not steady it. She let Riley hold it instead. And Riley did. Not tightly. Not possessively. Just firmly enough so Victoria would feel it. You are not alone. That night, Victoria did not say she was afraid. She did not apologize. She did not leave. She stayed. And that, more than any supernatural transformation, was the most human thing she had ever done. There are moments in life when reality feels too quiet, as if the world itself is holding its breath because something is about to shift, something you can't name yet, but you feel it in your bones, in your heartbeat, in the way light and shadow move differently around you. That was how Riley felt the night everything changed, not with violence, not with chaos, but with a silence so full it felt alive. Victoria had been distant that morning, not in the cold-hearted CEO way she used to be, not because she was pulling back emotionally, but because she was fighting something old, something that did not belong to the world of offices and schedules and neatly folded control. She was too still, too quiet, not hiding, bracing. Her eyes were calm, but not safe. They warned without words. Riley noticed yet another change. It was not fear she saw in Victoria. It was readiness. The day passed slowly, unusually quiet in the office. No meetings. No emails. No one called her name unless they had to. It was as if something in the atmosphere whispered caution. By late afternoon, the sky began to darken, not just with evening, but with the approach of a moon that was nearly full, glowing behind a veil of thick clouds. Riley felt it before she saw it. Victoria was changing, but not in her body. In presence. She didn't walk like she normally did. She watched where she stepped, as if listening to something no one else could hear. When the building emptied, and only the hum of night lights and distant traffic remained, Victoria walked to the atrium. This time she did not sit. She stood near the center, where shadows and moonlight mixed through the ceiling of glass. Riley followed, but slower, because she knew this was different. Victoria's voice was quiet, but held great weight. It's close. She didn't mean the moon. She didn't mean the wolf. She meant something deeper, something old. The first time I transformed in front of someone, Victoria said without turning, they screamed. Riley's voice was steady. I didn't. Victoria closed her eyes. The second time they tried to kill me. Riley stepped closer. I didn't. Victoria swallowed. The third time, they tried to cage me. Riley took another step. I didn't. Victoria turned. Her eyes weren't wolf-like, not golden, not glowing, but they were raw, open, frantic, but not with rage. With fear. Human fear. I don't want you to see it, Victoria whispered, not as a command, but as a confession. I don't want you to see me in that form. Riley didn't move back. Why? Victoria finally looked at her, truly looked, her eyes flickering with something almost unbearable. Because people don't fear the creature, she whispered. They fear how much of the creature is still human. Silence. Electric. Victoria continued, voice soft, broken in places it had never been before. It's not the claws. Not the teeth. Not the strength. She stepped closer, not threatening. Vulnerable. It's the fact that it still thinks. It still recognizes faces. It still remembers who it loves. Riley felt that land like thunder. Victoria wasn't afraid of becoming something monstrous. She was afraid that, even as a monster, she would still feel. And that meant she could still hurt. She could still love. And she could still lose. The first tremor went through her, not violent, just a ripple under her skin, only noticeable because she stilled her body too much trying to contain it. Riley watched, not with horror, with pain. Because it looked like suffering, not a curse, not possession, not ferality, but like grief trapped inside a body that didn't know how to hold it. Victoria held the edge of the marble pillar, knuckles white, jaw clenched, not in aggression, but restraint. It doesn't happen all at once, she whispered. It starts here. She touched her chest. With heartbeat. Not faster. Just louder. It's like it remembers something before I do. A flicker of golden flickered in her eyes. Not bright, not dramatic, just a shimmer. Not a wolf. A warning. You should go, Victoria said. Not command, not anger, pleading. Riley, you have to go. But Riley did not go. She stepped closer. Close enough that Victoria could feel her presence, hear her breathing, a human rhythm, calm, steady, grounding. Victoria, she said softly, I won't run from you. Victoria shook her head, not disagreeing, but aching. I don't know what I'll be, she whispered. I don't know if I'll still want to protect you. I don't know if the part that feels is stronger than the part that hunts. Riley's voice did not tremble. Then let me decide when I want to leave. Victoria stared at her, breath unsteady, eyes not pleading for safety, but for permission to hope. Another tremor passed through her. Not violent, but painful, like something was stretching beneath her skin, like emotions too large for her human form were trying to manifest. Her breath grew shallower, not desperate, just different. Too controlled. Too careful. Riley, I don't want to scare you, she whispered. And Riley's answer was the truest thing she ever said. I'm more afraid of you hiding from me than I am of seeing you. That was when something inside Victoria broke. Not physically, not in transformation, but in surrender. Not surrender to the wolf. Surrender to truth. She didn't transform fully, not yet. But the change flickered across her. Her eyes flashed gold, then back. Her pulse moved unnaturally under her skin. Her bones didn't snap, but they felt restless, as if pulled between two forms. And through all of it, she stayed standing. She stayed aware. She stayed present. Riley stepped closer, slowly, giving her time to react. Victoria did not move away. Riley reached out, not to stop, not to soothe, but simply to be there. Her hand hovered near Victoria's, not touching, not taking, just offering. And then Victoria took it. Not with her human hand, not with her wolf, but with whatever she was in that in-between space. Both and neither. Something fragile. Something whole. Something becoming. Her voice was rough, human with something ancient underneath. "You're not afraid." Riley's heartbeat thudded, but she didn't pull away. "I'm trembling," she whispered, "but not afraid." "Why?" Victoria asked, voice trembling with something closer to wonder than fear. "Because I've seen your worst," Riley whispered. "And it still looks like someone fighting to hold on to their humanity." Victoria's breathing changed, not wild, not feral, slow. Measured. Human. The danger didn't vanish, but it was no longer unchecked. And in the glow of the moon, through flickers of gold in her eyes and tremors beneath her skin, Victoria whispered, almost in disbelief, "You make me want to be human." Riley squeezed her hand, not hard, not controlling, just steady. "You already are." Victoria's body began to calm, not fully, not completely, but meaningfully. Through flickering shadows, a figure that was part human, part memory, part myth. Riley never looked away. And Victoria, for the first time in her life, didn't want to hide from her. At the edge of her transformation, somewhere between human and wolf, fear and truth, curse and choice, she no longer felt monstrous. She felt seen. And that, more than anything, changed everything. The first thing Riley noticed when Victoria began to change that night was not the way her body trembled, nor the pale shimmer that flickered across her skin like moonlight trying to break through. It was her silence. Not cold silence, not distant or defensive, but the silence of someone who had stopped fighting herself. The atrium was quiet, empty except for them, a wide expanse of darkness and glass, where the moon hung above like an unspoken truth neither could escape. But this time, Victoria wasn't trying to escape. The moonlight fell across her hair, catching on her eyes that were no longer entirely human, but never fully wolf either, soft gold bleeding into brown, wildness into tenderness, fear into hope. Her breaths came slow, but not controlled. She wasn't restraining her transformation. She was allowing it, but she stayed aware, stayed present, stayed with Riley. "This time," she said softly, "I won't hide." Riley stood just a few feet away, feeling her own heartbeat echoing through her chest like something ancient and familiar. Everything about this moment should have been terrifying, but it wasn't. Maybe because she had already seen Victoria's fear, her loneliness, her desire to be seen. That was far more powerful than claws or teeth or moonlight-born strength. The first real shift wasn't physical. It was emotional. Victoria didn't resist. She let the change move beneath her skin, not as violence, but as truth. It wasn't monstrous. It was raw, honest, beautiful. Her shoulders tightened, her pulse moved visibly beneath her skin, her breathing deepened, not with hunger, but with clarity. "I can feel everything," she whispered. "Every instinct, every memory, every doubt, every choice." She looked at Riley then, eyes fully changed now yet painfully, profoundly aware. "This is the part that terrifies me. Not the transformation. The fact that I still feel." Riley stepped closer. Slowly, gently, without hesitation. "Good," she whispered. "Feeling is the only part that proves you're still you." Something broke then. Not in her body, not with pain, but in her expression. Victoria let go of the last piece of herself she always kept hidden, the belief that she wasn't worthy of love when she wasn't perfectly controlled. Something shifted in the air, not magic, not energy, just presence. A presence so deeply human that it made the transformation feel less like turning into something else and more like becoming fully herself. Her hands trembled, veins faintly glowing, jaw tightening, not painful, just new. Her voice, when it came, was rougher at the edges, touched by something wild, but still entirely her. "I can't hear your heartbeat," she whispered. "It's steady." Riley nodded. "That's because I'm not afraid." "You should be." "I'm not." "Why?" And Riley said the one thing no one had ever said to her. "Not in this form, not in any form. Because I know you still recognize me." Victoria stood very still, not moving, not shifting further, not fully transforming. The moonlight swelled through the glass above them, catching her skin, feeding whatever lived inside her. But for the first time, instead of letting it take her away from herself, she let it illuminate who she had always been. She was not becoming something else. She was becoming wholly herself. Not hiding. Not fragmenting.
Whole.
She looked at Riley with golden eyes full of human tenderness.
Pain. Fear.
Longing.
Hope.
All of it there. All of it true. "I am not safe," she whispered. "Maybe love isn't meant to be safe," Riley said. "Maybe it's meant to be chosen." That was the moment. Not a dramatic transformation, not violence, not spectacle. Just choice. Victoria did not push Riley away. She did not retreat to protect her. She stepped closer.
Carefully. Gently.
Entirely aware. Not because she was in control, but because she trusted Riley to choose her even when she wasn't. And Riley did. She reached out, not to restrain, not to fix, not to soothe, but to be with her. Her hand hovered, waiting, not touching, not taking, just offering. And this time, Victoria didn't hesitate. She placed her hand in Riley's, claws beginning beneath her skin, wildness trembling in her veins, but her touch was gentle, tender, human. She wasn't fighting the transformation. She was feeling through it. And Riley didn't flinch. In that moment, Victoria whispered, voice trembling, "I still recognize you." "I always will," Riley whispered back. And then, without fear, without urgency, without hesitation, Riley lifted her hand to Victoria's cheek. It was warm, warm despite everything. And when Victoria leaned into the touch, it was no longer a woman becoming a wolf. It was a woman becoming free. Free from hiding. Free from shame. Free from believing that love only belonged to the safe parts of her. Her eyes glowed brighter, yet softened. Her breath steadied. And then, with the moon fully above them, Victoria settled. Not into human, not into wolf, but into both. Into herself. She didn't transform fully. She didn't lose herself. She didn't hurt Riley.
She didn't disappear.
She stayed. And that, more than anything, was proof that she could be loved. Slowly, gently, like something sacred and unhurried, Riley leaned forward until their foreheads touched. Not like before. Not like the first kiss. Tentative and uncertain. This time there was certainty. It wasn't passion. It wasn't control. It was belonging. A belonging that did not require perfection. A belonging that did not shatter under truth. A belonging that said, "You do not need to be safe to be loved. You just need to be real." When Victoria finally spoke, her voice trembled. Not from fear, but something deeper. "No one has ever stayed," Riley whispered back. "Then let us be the first ones who don't run." Victoria exhaled, a shuddering breath, full of release. And for the first time in her life, she felt peace not in suppression, not in control, but in acceptance. She rested her head on Riley's shoulder, neither wolf nor woman, but both. And Riley held her, not with possession, not to claim or protect, but to be present. And presence was enough. The moonlight moved slowly through the glass ceiling, tracing across both of them, quiet and silver, not dangerous anymore. Witnessing. Blessing. They stood for a long time, silhouettes bathed in silver, two figures, one with golden eyes, one steady, both choosing the kind of love that didn't erase darkness, but stood beside it. When it was over, When her breath calmed, when her heartbeat softened, Victoria looked into Riley's eyes, and for the first time, she didn't apologize. She simply said, with quiet, powerful certainty, "This is me." And Riley, without hesitation, without panic, without expectation, said the only words that mattered. "Then stay as you are." And she did. Not safe. Not perfect. Not cured.
But loved.
Exactly as she was. Thank you so much for being here and for believing in this channel. If you feel in your heart, you can donate with super thanks so I can focus more and more on this project. Your support helps me keep creating these love stories and bringing them to life for you. See you in the next video.